Hello, welcome to the Litfest 2023. And today we have our guest Rafaa Dalvi. Rafaa Dalvi is an Amazon Pen to Publish runner-up, and today we will have a talk show on the topic the changing paradigm of short stories. Welcome, Rafaa Dalvi, sir.
Hi, thanks Nitish. Good to be here.
So, as we are here to talk on short stories, so what's are your viewpoint on the short story first of all before continuing further discussion?
So I believe that actually storytelling first started with the Neanderthals. I have an image in my head of a tribe of early men sitting at the mouth of a cave at night, and suddenly one of them says spontaneously that you'll never believe what happened to me today while hunting. And the entire tribe goes quiet. The children are silenced, and the storyteller is given complete attention. This, I feel, is most likely the genesis of the short stories we write and read about. Storytelling, in one form or other, is hardwired into our human discourse. Also, according to the best selling author Yuval Noah Harari, Homo sapiens became the dominant species and is ruling the earth largely due to its unique ability to tell stories. So, coming back to the question about short stories, I believe that short stories have existed for centuries in one form or another. Think of Panchtantra from India, Aesop's tales, Aesop's fables from Greece, the Thousand and One Nights, Arabian Nights from the Middle East. Then we had tales of King Arthur and the Round Table from Britain. So these were some stories that we all know from specific regions. The oldest short story collection that I know about is Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Now, most of the stories that I mentioned, they are preachy. They conveyed that success and joy was in store for the good individual, and misery was in store for people who went astray. The short story is brief, it's deliberate, it's calculated in aim. It has served as an allegory, fable, and moral example, as well as pure entertainment. Now, the short story that we know and we read nowadays, the modern short story, it emerged during the 19th century. So the question arises, who wrote the first modern story? Frankly, I'm not sure, but there are quite a few short story writers who have become household names. There is Anton Chekhov, who's known as the greatest modern short story writer. Alexander Pushkin, who has written The Queen of
The
Spades.
twisted pace.
Then
I was
there's
saying the same thing.
yes, then there's my favorite, Edgar Allan Poe. He's written The Telltale Heart, The Pit and the Pendulum. Then there's the French Guy de Maupassant,
Guide
who's
them.
written The Necklace. There is Saki. There is O. Henry, who's written Gift of the Maggie. That was an inspiration for Lutera. Then there's Roald Dahl's The Landlady and Lamb to the Slaughter. Then the current ones who are still writing this Jeffrey Archer and India's own Ruskin Bond. So there's a rich talent of short story writers, and these writers they have a capability to imagine countless possibilities, and they write their short stories that in turn enchants, terrifies, even titillates the readers. Nearly every major writer that has existed has published at least a few short stories. In fact, there was William Faulkner had once suggested that many writers they started with the most difficult form of writing, which is poetry. They would fail, then they would move on to the next most difficult form, which was the short story. They would fail at that too,
Mhm.
and then they would finally settle on the novel. So, just wrapping up, it was actually Anton Chekhov who brought about a short story revolution and created a form of short story which actually changed the entire narrative. So, the actual form of short story, which had elements like a shapely plot and then having a tailored conclusion, all of that was abandoned. And suddenly, most of the writers they started following Chekhov. So Their short stories, they corresponded with the random, haphazard, inexplicable lives that we all lead. And I think that's the appeal of the short story. These short stories, they are actually snapshots of human nature, and the readers are given the rare chance to see in them more than what's real.
Okay, you talked about Anton Chekhov, you talked about Alexander Pushkin, which I am also favorite, the Queen of Spades specifically. You mentioned, and I'm myself a big fan. So the thing is that normally, otherwise, means the short story writers, especially the old age writers, have a format. Means it should be around 2,000 words, 3,000 words, or 5,000 words. But there's a guy, or a big author. I'm just referring him as a guy, a big author. I think in all about them, Franz Kafka. He has read
Yes,
Hunger
yes,
Artist. I hope you have read The Hunger Artist.
yes.
There is a lot
Metamorphosis,
of
yes,
stories of him, but The Hunger Artist is one of the
yes.
most popular. So he wrote in the frame of that era also, and he wrote also a very short story. It's very short, which we today fancy names as nano tales, micro tales. So
Yeah,
my question is that now people, especially the old school thought process writers like us, mm, say that okay, story have a format 2,000 words, 4,000 words, 5,000 words, max to max. But these young generation Gen Z are changing it into 3 to 4 lines. So how do we compare? Once we are taking the name of Franz Kafka, who have written the same
yes.
pattern, and now we are criticizing the same Gen Z for following Kafka.
So I am also guilty of that. My first three books are micro tales, but yeah, I think from epics to sagas, from parables to chronicles, from folklore to fake narratives, and now from short stories to microfiction, from nani stories to nano tales. Human history has actually, it's a never-ending story of stories, and yes, the short stories, they are getting shorter. Like you mentioned, Nanotale, which is a 6 word story, and it exactly what how it sounds like. I think you mentioned about Kafka. I also remember Hemingway.
Understanding.
His famous, yes, his 6 word story, for sale, baby shoes never worn. So this was his story,
It seems like
which
a
is
quote
quite
rather than a story.
yeah, but it
But it
has
is,
a
of course,
thing
it
like
is the honest Hemingway.
yes, yes. And then there's micro tales, like you mentioned, which are 140 character stories or less. Those are like Twitter tales. So there are, even I've written some of them. Like my mother told me never to talk to strangers. So I walked in silence with the man in black into the dark forest. So yes, these are the stories. It's for the Gen Z, but we need to also understand the attention span is decreasing. We are living in an era of smartphones. There's a huge impact of technology on the literary landscape. We are actually fighting with smartphones, social media, Netflix, and other OTT platforms. Uh, it's the attention economy, the fight for these, increasingly rare, undivided focus and concentration. We binge on television shows, we're addicted to our devices, but at the same time the artists, they want to take advantage of the creator economy. So right now, it's like if you're not present, people will forget you. Yes, we take years to write a manuscript, get it edited, then it takes another few months for the uh, manuscript to actually become a book and get published. So it's a long cycle, but at the same time, we have to be connected to our readers, because we know there are other authors or writers out there who are being connected. And right now our fight is not just with other like authors. We are all in the same group, but it's all kinds of influencers. It's if you're not there, people will just forget you. So I think because of that, people keep the artists or the writers, they keep coming up with these tales. I myself have done that. They make reels just so that they can connect with the Gen Z as well, because I think ultimately marketing is important. Yes, there are most of us that stay true to our art, which is writing a book of short stories or poetry or a novel. But at the same time, we know who is the target audience and what the target audience, what do they want. So I feel somewhere down the line, the lines are blurred a bit.
Okay,
But even then, I feel even a micro tale, that itself is a story. It's not, it is easy. You can say, novel is difficult to write, poetry is difficult, short stories are difficult, but at the same time I feel you need to have a certain finesse to understand how to write a unique micro tale.
of course we should have artistic quotient, in order to write even a single syllable. But as you said, that the attention span of the Gen Z is, getting less day by day. So aren't we guilty of not producing quality short stories? The reason why I'm giving this, I'm asking this question, still Gen Z is going to the theaters to have a 3 hour movie. If the attention span
Okay.
is less, then they should, have it just on the reels.
So I also feel, I think it's not just about short stories in general, it's about reading. Like, so I'll focus on reading right now. So it's like, if you are a reader, you will pick up books. If you are a hardcore reader, then you will end up reading novels, maybe fiction, non-fiction. And if you're done with fiction, with novels, you are hungry for more kinds of different formats. And that is when I think you'll go after short stories also. In our, especially in India, the number of short story collections that's being published annually, that's not much. And I don't know who to blame. Maybe it's the writers, it's the readers, but that is the case. And the short story, even I personally, when I was a ardent reader, before I turned into a writer, I would pick up short stories of foreign authors. And amongst the Indian authors, I think it was Ruskin Bond. That's about it. It was only when once I started writing and I was like, oh, there are a lot of anthologies, there are a lot of writers. I became acquainted to other writers. Then I picked up their books. That I did because I wanted to know what is the competition, what is the market like, what kinds of books are being published. That for me was a bit of research. Uh, so yeah, yes. Why, if you're comparing a movie with a book, I don't think that is valid enough. Yes, we are fighting for the same attention span, but at the same time, uh, you need to have that innate feeling to read a book. Like, for example, my family, most of them still read books, but I know I have a lot of friends who were never in the habit of reading books, so they still don't read. They are on social media, so while scrolling you come across micro tales by writers, by poets, or by platforms like, say, scribbled stories or terribly tiny tales. You like them, you'll engage with them, but that's about it. They won't go out of their way and purchase a book if they're not a usual reader. But I'm glad there are writers like, Chetan Bhagat, because of whom a lot of non-readers turned into readers, and once they got into the habit of reading, then they started exploring. So yeah, it's a good thing. I hope that going forward, more and more Gen Zs and all of them, they get into reading books.
You talked about, that whenever I have to read short stories, I turn to for, obviously I also do, but there's a one different faction of mine, that when it comes to it, I know that in India, when it comes to the short stories in English language, there are very few writers whom we directly, recall. But when
Yeah.
we go for different languages, if I talk, I'm from a Hindi belt. Okay,
Yes.
so Munshi Premchand, Sudarshan, Jaishankar Prasad. There are a lot of names. These two, three are the most prominent names. When you go to, the Bengali, there are Rabindranath Tagore, Sarachan Chattopadhyay,
Yes.
Bangkiran Chattopadhyay. So why, there is one question of mine, in India specifically, why there are the vernacular languages have more enriching short stories? Means history wise also, and when you see the current scenario, they have better short story writers rather than the English language. I think someone is connecting, also connecting with us.
Okay.
Mahavish.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I believe that's a very good question, and somewhere down the line, I feel that yes, maybe there are very good Indian writers in English language as well. Just that maybe they haven't got enough visibility. That might be one thing, because if you talk about Bengali literature, for example, there is Tagore, there is yeah, the names you said for Hindi, Munshi Premchand, all of those. That's the universe. That's the Hindi universe, and in that universe, these writers, they are the masters. But
Yeah,
now
they
when
are the
it
one of
comes
the
to
best ones,
yes,
of course.
yes, and now when it comes to English, the readers, I feel that Indian writers, even now, they aren't read that much or revered that much. Uh, the modern ones, it's mostly the foreign authors uh, who are revered, and I feel it's, yeah, again I feel it has to do with the
Marketing.
visibility factor. Yeah. But yes, the names you said, they are brilliant writers, and I agree. I hope that someday, apart from Ruskin Bond, there are other writers also who become household names. Like right now, I know there are people who are very good in their niche, like in horror. There are a handful of
I
four
would
or five Indian writers.
I would request Mahvish to please turn off her audio because I think there has been a sound from her side and it is creating, a little bit of disturbance. Mahvish ma'am, please. I think she's ma'am. From her name, I'm considering she's ma'am. So please, it would be a request to mute her audio. Ma'am, please. Okay.
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 Yes.
So what I was saying that we had okay, so video and so what I was saying that you talked about that okay, they are not getting visibility enough and something like that. But why is not the case with the novels, English novels? Because we have already like Mukul Raj Anand, okay, who has that the Coolie, one of the very famous novels which
Yes.
I actually adore, very much. There are a lot of means the Coolie I love
Yes.
the most.
So I feel novels. Okay, I will just first compare novels with short stories. See, short stories, the biggest one of the cons is that it may lack intricate world building and complex character development that a novel can provide. Also, in a majority of short stories, there are open endings or cliffhangers
Cliffhangers.
that can leave, yes, that can leave the readers feeling either confused or unsatisfied. That is not the case with novels. And novels, uh, mostly what I've also seen is people pick up when they are traveling, either in railway stations or at airports. They go to the bookstore, they just pick up a story because they, for 1 or 2 hours, they want to be there with one story, just get engrossed in a world and then forget the real world.
Entire
That
cinema.
I feel cannot be done in short stories. Short stories, see, short stories is very good if you are an emerging writer. You get to experiment a lot, different plots, and if you've written a very good short story, and you can actually maybe turn it into a novel later on, adding few characters. But
Isn't it
uh,
okay? Sorry to interrupt, but isn't it the gravest
yeah,
mistake which the new writers are trying to do? That firstly writing a short story, and if if people are giving feedback that you've written a good story, why not translate it into a novel? Because what I have understood myself as a short story writer or as a novelist, because I have written both, that short story is completely a different form of art, and novel is a
yes,
completely different form of art. As I said, I'm a little
yes.
bit old school thought process guy. So isn't it a means a Himalayan blunder? I will say that once you write a short story and then you elongate it to a novel.
So actually, it depends. So, for example, if your short story is in a different world, not a normal story, it has say multiple characters, and it's say around about 7,500 or 10,000 word short stories. It has multiple scenes and characters. So that I feel is a very that has the potential to actually be converted into a novel. But again, not all the short stories can be converted. I was just giving an example that if it works, it can be, because at the end of the day, novels are the ones that sell a lot. You pick up any top 10 selling books of any year, most of them will be novels, and rightly so, because um short stories are actually available online also for free. So a lot of people don't want to, and the best short stories now that on a lot of different sites, Project Gutenberg and all, you get
Gutenberg
to
and yeah, there
read,
are a lot of
yeah, you get to read the best short stories from the masters of, like, the best short story writers. So why would you
why
want
to
to?
spend few
Uh,
bucks on
yes,
short stories.
and yeah, exactly. And I'll tell you what, I personally I feel that most of the writers, like even Jeffrey Archer, I for a fact know that he became quite famous. I personally, I read his novels, and then I got to know, as a kid, I read his novels. I was like, wow, enamored. And then I got to know he's written short story collections as well, and that is when I purchased. So I feel that, yes, you write your short stories, you write your microfiction, poetry, all of that, but at the same time, we as writers, we should experiment and write novels also, because I feel that will get the maximum eyeballs. And once that hits a sixer, then people will come back and go to your previous body of work, which may include a different writing formats. So I feel that should be a strategy that most of us as writers we should follow, then not just limit us to one writing format, because there's also challenge. And I think we as humans, we love challenges.
Of course.
So an artist also, it's quite interesting. Like right now I am working on my first novel, and it is a different it's like
Challenge.
a yeah, it's like a different mountain altogether to climb. It's like, oh, whatever I knew previously, that is not working, and I have to, but it's fun also, you are learning new things. So yeah.
Yeah, that's so I would agree that writing. And there is one thing which I would like to add. The biggest disadvantage is that either you write a very good short story, that's wonderful, or either you just are left stranded in the middle of nowhere. So this is one thing,
Yes.
and it had happened with the great writers. If I say leave aside the few greats like Munshi Premchand, you talked about Franz Kafka, you talked about Anton Chekhov, Alexander Pushkin, means the top A plus plus writers. If you leave that, you will find some of the great novelists have written short story. Some of them are very good, and some of them like this do not give justice, do justice to his stature. So this is the fundamental
Yeah,
art.
I think you're right. I think you're right, because they are difficult, different kinds of formats, and they have their own style that you need to understand. So yeah, there may be, like, maybe J.K. Rowling might, someone like J.K. Rowling might be writing selling millions of copies, but maybe when it comes to short stories, I'm just giving an hypothetical example, it may be different, like expecting a writer who has done very good in one format to replicate the same success is not so it's difficult. Just like, if there's a director, he has made horror movies really well, or he's made comedies very well, so it's very difficult to expect that he'll make a tragic story, or a heartwarming tale with the same he will not give it the same treatment. So I think that is where also is a different, like currently I am working on a novel after writing so many short stories, and it's difficult for me also. I cannot give it the same treatment, and I'm also not sure if I'll be able to replicate the same kind of success that I've done in the past. But yes, like you rightly pointed out, not everything is same, and I think that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, and it's not like that. What I have felt means people say that novels are good for adaptations. Now talking about some modern era, means our era, that we write and we have a desire. Means I will say the term desire specifically to get our book onto the silver screen. But
Yes.
but what I have felt that even the short stories have a better adaptation. Once it all comes down to the quality. Actually, I was reading few days before about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Everything about the Sherlock Holmes is just a short story, not even a novel. One or two is there about the
Yeah.
novels. So it's all about the quality. And now, so what is your take? It's just the quality, or again, as you said about the marketing part, which I will come once again. Marketing is necessary, which I understand, but at which level?
So I feel, like you pointed out, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes. I think the only novel or one of the novels was The Hound of Baskervilles. Uh, that was made into a movie, but the series, most of his famous short stories were converted into episodes. There have been shows of Rabindranath Tagore and a lot of detective, because these are very easy episodic. They have a character, a recurring character, so they can make a series out of it, and they have like the short stories are basically episodes, so that works for this format.
But
But
but sorry to interrupt,
yes,
but I have a point. You said these are very episodic in nature, but when we pay a little bit of attention, these stories have written been I think around 70 years, 80 years, 100 years, or sometimes 200 years before. There was no even concept of such adaptation actually. So is it
yes.
their mastery, or it is our failure to not write such quality story? Means obviously I'm comparing someone to the great of, as you said, the term masters of their craft. So is it our failure as a writer, or is it their mastery over their craft? My question is that.
Oh, okay, I'll give you an example. This is what my personally feel. It may be up for debate. It's that the writers that we're talking about, say Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Shakespeare, Roald Dahl, Charles Dickens,
Yeah,
all of
Charles
these,
Dickens.
they these have all of them have existed over several centuries,
Yes.
and there are a handful of people, and we are talking about, say, last 50 years, 20 years, and there's a lot of stories that we ourselves are writing. We are continuously writing stories. So I think it is not fair to compare us to them, because even now, here also there are a lot of very good writers. There is Arundhati Roy, Salman Rushdie. There are great writers. So if every era has their writers, so
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
But coming back to what you said about short stories, I agree. Right now, everyone wants a book to screen adaptation because of the OTT platforms. OTT platforms, thankfully, are looking at books because they know the written material, the source material is already present. And I think one of the major reasons is also the success of Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire. It already had its source material, and it turned out to be one of the, I think it will be one of the top three shows made so far, barring the last season. But yeah, so
Bearing glass.
that I think, yes, that I think was one of the major reasons why a lot of broadcasters and production houses, OTT platforms, now they're looking at books that, hey, we have a group of writers, let us pick up good books that have done well in the market, and let's see how they can be what we can do about it. And then there's a factor also, they know there's a certain fan base of books
Yeah,
readers
agreed.
who
Agreed,
would who will
100%.
definitely come and watch the
You will
movies.
definitely
And
come
if
and
you
watch
have,
it into, yeah.
yes, and if you have some very good stars attached to the project, then they'll get more eyeballs. I think Sushant Singh's last movie was an adaptation of The Fault in Our Stars,
The Fault in Our
and
Stars.
it did really well.
It did really
Yes,
well.
it
Yeah, there
did
was some
really
support
well
responses.
on that OTT platform. It was on Hotstar, but yeah, so. And here the problem is when it comes to short stories, like my short story collection, Chasing Nirvana, it doesn't have any recurring character. All the characters are different. And it's not even falling under one genre, like horror. Say, for example, if you had, there is, I think, a series on Netflix called Love, Sex, and Robots, or Love, Death, and Robots. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Love, Death, and Robots, I guess. So that I feel comes closest to the having different short stories, different genres. But again, then there is AI. There are few recurring themes in all the uh, episodes of that show. So it's very difficult for short stories to get a book to screen adaptation.
Okay, now as you are writing novels, so considering a time frame, my last question would be on in which genre you are writing the novel, and when it is, about to come?
Okay, so currently I'm working on a horror themed novel. One of the reasons is that this novel will have multiple storylines,
Okay.
multiple stories as well. So it is a bit close to my strength with the short stories.
And when
But
it
at
is
the same
coming?
time,
And when it is
yes.
coming?
So I'm still working on it. I've written almost 40 to 50% of it. So I think maybe by 2025 or so.
Okay. So
Let's
it's
see.
a long time. Long time.
Yes, long time.
Okay. So we will wrap up the session, and
Sure.
it had been a pleasure, discussing about the various aspects of short stories, and the whole
Yes.
Litfest team actually thank you for your time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.